white Bordeaux. A lot of people, French people, were drinking a lot of half-dry Bordeaux, and rich people were settling in Entre-Deux-Mers. That's why my father decided to buy Château Thieuley, because he wanted to get richer, maybe. And he was convinced, and we are still. He was convinced then that there was a great potential for making good white wine in this area. We'll talk later about the soil. So it started at the end of the 40s, and as you said, this is really my father who developed the estate, who increased the number of hectares, and who made the reputation of Château Thieuley. And with my sister Mary, for 12 years, we're trying to do our best to highlight our wines everywhere in the world, and especially in England.
Excellent. Now, can you maybe explain, Sylvie and Marie, the different roles that you play within the setup?
So I'm more in charge of all the technical aspects. So really all the vineyards and all the winery. But Sylvie is also helping me when we do blending or for the harvests. And then Sylvie.
And I'm in charge of the commercial side. But we both have a very technical background. We studied. We are both engineer in agriculture. We studied agriculture and agronomy, and also we are enologists from Faculty of Enology of Bordeaux. So our background is very technical. But as I was a little bit more chatty than Mary, my father decided to give me the commercial side, to be honest.
Fantastic. Now, in terms of your plantings, I think I'm right in saying you are more or less 50-50 red and white. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. In fact, it is quite uncommon in Bordeaux, because so the Entre-Deux-Mers area was only planted by white varieties until the 56, with the frost we had in 56 in Bordeaux. And from this period, from 56, after, all the farmers were replanting on red, because there was more demand on red wine than white wine. But in Château Thieuley, we kept on planting white varieties, and today it's 50-50. Which is quite uncommon, because the white production in Bordeaux is only 8%. With the sweet wine and dry white wine, it's only 8% of the total production. So we're quite different from maybe the other winery.
Now, Anna has put a map up for us to see. So this shows you where La Sauve is, which is where Château Thieuley is based. Now, you can see, everybody, that there is also another chateau name there, Clos Sainte-Anne. Maybe Marie, as you live there, you can talk about it.
Yeah, Clos Sainte-Anne is very small estate, at about 15 kilometers, between 10 kilometers from Château Thieuley. We have only 6 hectares of vines. It's mainly Merlot, and all the vineyards is planted on a slope, on the south exposure slopes, and we have very different kind of terroir. On the top we have a lot of gravelous soils, and then in the middle is more clay and gravelous, and then on the bottom, yeah, it's really limestone. So it's really soils that are perfect for Merlot, and it's kind of, we call it the Petite Toscane, small Tuscany.
Little Tuscany.
Very...
And how, sorry to interrupt, and how do those soils differ from the soils at Chile?
The first thing that is different is really the exposure, because we are really south exposure on one slope. At Château Thieuley, we also have gravulus, we also have limestone, we also have a lot of clay. Here in Clos Sainte-Anne, there is sort of microclimates. Really, really, it's the exposure and all the forest around that gives such elegant and warm Merlot.
And so how were the decisions made in terms of at Thieuley, coming back to Thieuley, in terms of where to plant red and where to plant white?
So first of all, depending on the soil, we have really different kind of soil in Château Thieuley. We have very warm soil, like gravulous soils. We have some also chalky and limestone. And we have some also silt,
clay and silt.
Silt. So those clay and silt are more cold soils, and we prefer planting some white. And on warm soil, we prefer planting some reds. And also depending on the exposure. Here we are in a very hilly area with north exposure, east exposure, south exposure, depending on where you are on the hill. So it's really when it's south exposure, it's more red, and when it's east and north, it's more white.
To keep the freshness, as you imagine, to keep the freshness, the cold soils for the white, and the warm and the hot soils with gravulus for the red. This is to sum up.
Fine. And in terms of the way climate seems to be changing, or it's a topic that that I receive a lot of questions about. What are you seeing in terms of how the climate is affecting the viticulture over the last few years?
We cannot deny there's the global warming. Global warming, we can see it every day, and we can see it every day in the vineyard too. So if you compare the date of harvest from 10 years ago when we arrived and now, it's much more. We start the harvest maybe 8 days earlier than 10 years ago. And we start the harvest compared with my father's, yes, it was 15 to 20 days when it started. So the global warming is we cannot deny it, it's here. So we really adapted, for example, we don't de-leaf the vines any longer. We used to do it in the 90s, but we don't do it anymore because we don't need. After we're trying to adapt also the date of harvest, as you say, we pick the grape earlier, and sometimes we plant some new varieties as well. For example, we planted some Petit Verdot for red, and we planted some Colombar because it has a very good acidity level. So yes, we're trying to play with different varieties in order to reach the best balance.
Okay, so maybe we can talk individually now about the wines that the Wine Society takes from you. So we take your white, and we also take your red. So perhaps we can talk about the white first of all. The Wine Society is currently selling the 2018 vintage. I don't know what vintage you have in front of you there. Is that the 19?
It's the 18, huh?
18. Okay, so I believe we still have a bit of stock of 18, and we have some more coming in at the end of the month. But maybe talk a little bit about which varieties you use for the white and the aging potential of the wine.
We think at Château Thieuley, we think that the complexity comes from the diversity. That's why we do blend all our wines, and especially this one, So this is a blend of 45% Sauvignon Blanc, 15% Sauvignon Gris. Maybe we can talk later about Sauvignon Gris because it's not as known as Sauvignon Blanc, and 40% Semillon. Mary, maybe you can talk about the vinification of the whites.
So what is very important on this wine is age on lees, and this is very, very important for us. We age on lees for at least 4 months, and the aging on lees will give a lot of more complexity, more full body and richness for sure, and will give also the
aging potential.
Aging potential, and because we age on lees, also we add less sulfate than we used to 10 years ago. We really add less sulfates because the lees, they protect the wine from the oxygen. So it's a wine that is fermented in stainless steel and in concrete tanks. And we just want to keep the fruit and all the minerality and all the freshness of our grapes.
So the Sauvignon Blanc brings the freshness and all the flavors from Sauvignon Blanc that you know, the exotic fruits and and also some minerality when it ages a little bit. The Sauvignon Gris is more floral, but we have to be careful because the acidity level of Sauvignon Gris is most of the time lower than Sauvignon Blanc. So we don't want something too fat as well. So we cannot put more because we want also freshness. And the Semillon is really important for the aging potential and the roundness. And this is a variety that expresses a bouquet after 2-3 years. When it's young, it's not very expressive, but it comes out a little bit after the Sauvignon.
Yes, I mean, that's one thing I have noticed. You know, we're on the 18 vintage now, and there's no hurry to drink the 18. But I think you're running out of stock now. I think that the order that's coming in at the end of the month is our last shipment of the 18, and then we'll move on to the 19. Is that correct? Yeah. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a clue as to the differences between the 18 and the 19 for whites.
So it's a kind of two vintage. For me, they're quite close because we had a lot of sun on the summer. Except that on 19 we had a little bit more rain, so there is more freshness than on the 18 for sure. Otherwise, we harvest the 18 a little bit earlier than the 19, but it's kind of quite a sunny vintage, so quite similar for me.
Okay.
It's difficult to say which one we do prefer because they are both quite good vintages. But for white, they are like quite close. But for the moment to drink now, I would prefer the 18 because it has 1 year in bottle, so it's ready. Whereas we bottled the 19 last March, so it's a little bit. The filtration is a little bit. C'est trop proche, too close.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the white. How about a little explanation of the red? I mean, we're very lucky. We've been selling the Courcelle's 2015 red now for probably 18 months, and I'm pleased to say that they've put in a nice big reserve for us because members love the 15. I'm afraid we're out of stock at the moment, but it's due in at the end of the month, and we will be carrying on selling the 15 for quite a few months to come because of our reserve. Marie, maybe you could take us through what the blend is and what the difference is in the way you make the Thieuley Rouge.
So it's a blend of about 70% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. Non, il n'y a pas de kilo. No.
30%.
Sorry, 30%. 30% of Cabernet Sauvignon. 2015 was very well balanced year. We had a lot of sun in the summer, a very sunny autumn, but still the yield were very low. So that's why we have this complexity on this wine, because the yield were very low. It's what we want to do with this wine is really to keep the fruit, and that you will really feel all the fruit we had in our grapes. So it's quite juicy wine, very elegant and well balanced. Mm-hmm. We age in barrels, but you don't really feel the oak. It's very well mixed, and this is the way we want to make our Château Thieuley Classic Red.
Yes, if I can add, Mary's philosophy and our philosophy is to find the best balance. That's we always have this word in mind when we do the wine and we do the vinification and the blend, because we don't want over matured Merlot. We don't want to pick too late. We want a good ripeness, but we want the wine to be also easy drinking and to be well balanced so that's important. And compared with my father's style, we use less oak than before. Yeah. Because we want to integrate a little bit more the oak than it used to be, and we have more fruit by using less oak. So. Yeah. So,
and also the extraction is not the same. We really kind of we do a gentle extraction while we doing the fermentation and the maceration.
And typically for the red, in a good vintage like 2015, I mean, I think I put a drink date on that wine of 2022, but it's such a lovely wine. I think you could probably keep it a bit longer than that.
Yeah. Actually, it's really good to drink. I love it, but I think you can keep a little bit longer for sure. I'm sure, because there is this freshness, and
exactly.
The balance is very well, and this freshness will gives you will be able to keep it a little bit longer. Yes.
I think, Sylvie, you said to me once that your American market, the US market, wants a young vintage of the wine, and that's why we've got a nice big reserve of the 2015, because actually our market likes a slightly more mature claret.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I would say that the American buyers, they prefer having the last vintage and also having the best noted coated wine.
Yes.
So personally, we don't do wine to get notes and to get. We want to make the wine we like, and we want to make the best wine as possible. But we don't look for
scores. Well, as you know, the Wine Society doesn't ever quote scores because we don't really approve. So. What we like is wines that are authentic, and I think these are two very authentic wines, and they are exactly the kind of wine that our members love. Maybe we can finish this section before the Q&A and talk about wine and food matching, because I know you're a very gastronomic family. Members might be interested to hear that when I visit Marie and Sylvie, I always come in December so that I can taste the new vintage of the white, and I always arrange my visit to coincide with lunch, because Madame Courselle, Sylvie and Marie's mother, is a brilliant cook. But maybe tell us what foods you would serve with the white and the red.
Yes, I always say we learned from my father the technical side, but we learned from our mother the pleasure of good things as well. So that's a good combination. We're very lucky. Yes, for the white, this kind of white is very is good by itself. So we always we can drink it at aperitifs. Of course, with fish, with smoked salmon, it can be also a ceviche of scallops. We love the ceviche when the fish is fresh. It's a very we love the texture. Of course, with oysters or goat cheese. So this is kind of very easy. It's easy to pair, easy to food pair, I would say. This kind of white wine, I think.
Okay. And how about the red, Marie?
So with the red, I will say easy to pair with red meats like beef, or also kind of lamb.
Yeah.
With lamb, it's very good. With all kind of cheese, also
soft cheese, especially soft cheese like brie or Saint-Nectaire or Camembert.
Yeah.
And do you know our duck parmentier? I don't know if you tried it, but we do some duck parmentier, which is also a good plate to pair with the wine.
Well, that'll be this December. So.
Okay, I will remember.
Fine. So I think that maybe concludes the first part of the webinar today. Anna, in terms of the Q&A, how would you like to do it?
Yeah, so we've had lots of questions coming in already. So mostly, I have to say, for Sylvie and Marie, but you have had a couple of questions yourself, Tim. So
okay.
I will call upon you as and when. I'm going to ask the first question on behalf of a member who emailed in earlier, who wanted to know, you obviously spoke about the acidity levels in the white wine. How high is the acid in the 2019 white?
2019.
So we more talk about, I prefer talking about pH than level of acidity, because all the because all the feeling when it's well balanced is because you have a nice level of pH. So for 2018, the pH of whites is about 3.5, and for 2019, the pH of the wine is more 3.4. So this is very, for me, the pH is more important than the level of acidity. Our level of acidity is never very, never very high here in Château Thieuley, because we also do cold maceration, and so we lose a little bit of acidity. But for us, it's more the pH which is more important.
Perfect. I think that answers the question perfectly. So that's great. I'm hoping that Roberta might be ready to ask. So Roberta, if you unmute yourself, then you may ask your own question, if that's all right.
Hi there. Hi, I just wanted to understand what the sales trajectory has been over the last few years for white Bordeaux in particular. And the reason I ask is just because I always think it massively over delivers, always try and stock up. And you would think there's a greater consumer appreciation of it now because more and more consumers are drinking Sauvignon Blanc in the UK. But what, and maybe a question for Tim as well, as you both, just to answer that in terms of sales trajectory.
Tim, do you want to start on that?
Okay, well, I'll start and talk about the Wine Society in general. Obviously, as Bordeaux buyer for the Wine Society, one of my jobs is to try and encourage members to buy wines from my area. I think I completely agree with you. I think white Bordeaux is desperately underrated, but it's also desperately hard to sell. I would love to have a bigger range of dry white Bordeaux because I think it offers terrific value. But demand is such that we have a limited number of of spots in our price list. I'm pleased to say that Chile is a must stock because we've had it for so long and members demand it. But I would love to be able to go up the scale. I think there are some fantastic wines from Pessac Léognan, from the Grave, particularly the ones that have a bit of Semillon in them and with a little bit of wood aging, because these are wines that keep brilliantly and are great for food matching. So we have seen a steady increase in sales of dry white Bordeaux, but the problem is that New Zealand Sauvignon seems to capture people's imagination maybe more readily than Bordeaux. But maybe the Courselle sisters would like to comment about their sales of the white in general.
Yes, you're right. Thank you for the question, because it's Bordeaux white production is an enigma, because all the professional and all the wine amateurs, they do like when they drink it and they say, okay, it's so underestimated wines. They are such underestimated wine, but it's true that the demand is not so big. So it's an enigma. The potential is here, the good value is here, but the demand is not as high as we would like to. But Thieuley, as my father made the reputation of Château Thieuley with the white first. So we have a strong image of white, and we love it. And we want to keep on supporting the white Bordeaux, because our range of white really deserves it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Our next question is from Adam Chadwick. Adam, I'm hoping you've been allowed to speak, so please do feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed a lot of the webinars that have been going on with winemakers, and it seemed to me that that there is an increasing presence of female winemakers, and I wanted to know from the sisters whether they think that, or why this perhaps is in the wine world, as opposed to some other areas of industry where women find it harder to make their presence felt and to be successful.
So Mary and I, we really grew up in the middle of the vineyard, and we really were involved in all the everyday activities of the winery very young. So for us, it was like natural to take over the business. Maybe my father was a little bit surprised that we wanted both to take over the family vineyard, but for us it was an evidence. When I was in Faculty of Enology of Bordeaux, we were like 30% of the students were female, and I heard that it was like 20 years ago now, or a little bit less, but I've heard that now 60% of the students of enology were female last year. So I think there are more and more female, but it's true that in the production there are more, but there are still less than men. Huh? So the key, I would say that the key role are most of the time in the very big names, big chateau. The key roles are handled by men. Oh, this is the reality. It's not only in the wine industry. I think it's a little bit everywhere like that.
Understood. Thank you very much. Now, Leah Newman, I'm not certain that you've been, you should be able to ask your question.
Hi, thanks, Anna. I just wanted to say that one of my favourite white wines are Bordeaux blends, and there's some really good examples that come out of the New World countries as well, not just from Bordeaux. So I wanted to ask the ladies, do they enjoy Bordeaux white blends from elsewhere? And if so, which are their favourites?
But it's true that there are not many places where there are so many blends you're right. For example, I discovered recently the wine from Portugal, but they are, I think, made mainly with Alvarinho. We like tasting, we like experimenting, but it's true that to get blends, it's more difficult. For example, when we drink a Burgundy wines, you know it's 100% Chardonnay. When you drink Loire Valley, it's most of the time Sauvignon Blanc or Chenin, but it's 100%. So maybe in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, where I did an harvest, there was blend, a lot of different varieties, as they have 13 varieties allowed. But they were, for me, a little bit too low in acidity, to be honest. It's not the taste I really enjoy. But yes, some Pic Saint-Loup whites, sometimes, as they are higher in altitude, it's very good. But it's more
Sylvie,
difficult to find a blend from everywhere, I think.
In Bordeaux, specifically, Sylvie and Marie, are there any particular dry white Bordeaux that you drink and like outside Chile?
It's true. For example, an old Malartic-la-Gravière. I love this wine when it's old. It ages so well. I mean, it's for me, it's one of a very good wine. T'as d'autres blancs que tu apprécies, toi? Dans les graves, peut-être. Yeah, some Pessac-Léognan style. Yeah, well, oaked barrel fermented wine, but you have to age them a little bit, I think. Fieusal has a great also has a great freshness. I like it because it's fresh. And some Chateau Chantegrive as well is a good value, and the barrel fermented wine is a very good one.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I think we have our next question ready, and I believe, Nick, you might be ready to ask. Hopefully, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, Nick.
Sure. What I would like to know is, what is the difference between the white Bordeaux between Pessac-Léognan and Entre-Deux-Mers? The white wine I really like is the R, which is R de Rousseau, I think it's pronounced, and that's about a 70% Sauvignon, sorry, 70% Sauvignon Blanc, 30% Sauvignon. And I wondered how that would compare with your wines.
Should we start with the first part, the difference between the appellation?
Yes, the soils of Pessac-Léognan is a little bit different. It's first of all, it's a vineyard inside, almost inside the city, so there's a microclimate and it's very hotter than in Entre-Deux-Mers, which is 25 kilometers from the city. And Pessac-Léognan also has more sémillon most of the time than our blend, which have in Entre-Deux-Mers we have more Sauvignon and most of the time the Pessac-Léognan are barrel fermented, whereas in Entre-Deux-Mers we do also produce another cuvée barrel fermented, but the Château Thieuley, the classic, is stainless steel tank fermented. So the differences come also from the diversity of the terroir and of the blending. Each wine is quite unique. Huh? It's difficult to have only one style of Bordeaux white. You have several styles.
Fantastic, thank you. And then, Nick, we might follow up with a comparison on the specific wine you mentioned. So if you email in and let us know, oh, we may have lost them there. If you email in and let us know, then we will we'll compare those two wines for you. So Tim, I did have a question for you actually, which is perfect timing. I think unfortunately the ladies have dropped out for a moment. But Peter Casey, if you are able. Obviously, the first part of your question was directed at the Courselle sisters, but if you're available at all, feel free to ask your question.
I hope so. Last time I tried this, it crashed the system. But I noticed from the Chateau's website that they produce a claret, and that's a style we very rarely see in the UK these days. I'd be interested in your comments on the demand for it, on the possibility of listing it, and also the sisters' comment on the wine itself. What's leading them still to make this rather under-demanded wine, and what they think of their version.
Okay.
Okay. Are you back, Sylvie and Marie?
Yes, sorry.
Did you hear the question correctly?
Yes, we were talking about the claret, why we do, where we still do produce claret, and what is a claret, in fact, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So I know that you produce a normal rosé and a claret, don't you?
Yes, it's true.
Maybe explain the differences first of all.
Yes, but if you want to understand the claret, we have to make a little bit of history, because you know that Aquitaine was British in the 13th century. When the King Henry got married with Aliénor d'Aquitaine, and most of the wines from Bordeaux, the young wines, they were going to London, and the British called this light red style, they called it claret. So I think claret is coming from the claret and this kind of a young red Bordeaux, and the appellation AOC Bordeaux Claret there are some wines, it's not a red, it's not a rosé, it's between. So that's why it's difficult to understand for customers, because we don't know where to put this kind of wine. Personally, I do think claret. So you have before pressing, you have a little skin contact maceration. So the wine is more intense than a rosé. Rosé, we do press directly the grapes and we collect the juice. For the claret, we do skin contact maceration from 24 to 36 hours. Okay, so that it has a light structure. It has a lot of fruit. It has a light structure, but there are no tannins. So it's a very easy drinking wine. And my father used to make only claret, and we started making rosé recently. It was only 10 years ago. 2000, yeah. So we are fan of claret. We do think there's a great potential for. It's such an easy and festive wine, so we want to keep on making this kind of light red style. But it's true that today the demand is more important on rosé than on claret. But yes, but if nobody continues producing this kind of wine, it will disappear. So we want to defend this style. Do you purchase claret at the Wine Society?
No. So I was going to come to the second part of Mr. Casey's question, which is, it's really just to say that Rosé Bordeaux is already quite a minority sport, and because there are rosés from all over the world, I'm permitted to buy one rosé regularly, which is from your friends, the Despans. I would love to be able to add another one, and the claret would be even more of a minority sport, because, as you say, Sylvie, it's not an easy wine to explain on the face of it, but it certainly is of interest, I think, and it's certainly an interesting food wine. So maybe there'll be the odd slot that will open itself up for a claret, and I know where to come if there is.
Welcome.
Absolutely. And I often find it's quite hard. People just don't know what it is, and people are often scared of what they don't know. Whereas when you come and visit in Bordeaux and get familiar with it, it's absolutely gorgeous. We do have a few more questions. We're going to try and squeeze in as many as we can. I'm hoping that Azim has been unmuted. Yes, it looks like you have. Fantastic.
First of all, thank you, Marie and Sylvie, for sharing your thoughts with us. Much appreciated.
I think you might have something wrong with your microphone, Mr. Karimji. I might have to ask your question on your behalf, if that's all right. You've got a bit of a strange, a bit of an odd microphone situation going on.
Please ask on my behalf.
It was about your Cuvée Francis and whether you make it every year, and what basically, could you tell members a little bit more about it and what it is?
The Cuvée Francis Courselle, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the main difference with the classic is that the fermentation is done in barrels. So it's barrel fermented, and then we age the wine for 9 months on lees in the barrels. Whereas the classic white is stainless steel tank fermented, and we age them in concrete tank for only 3 months. So no barrels for the classic, and also for the Cuvée Francis Courselle, they come from very old vines, from 50% Sauvignon Blanc and 50% Semillon. And the Semillon were planted by our grandfather. They are very old vines with very low yields. So a different style, a more gastronomic wine, I would say.
Fantastic. And do you produce that every year?
Yes, we do. Yes,
yeah, every year. Fantastic.
But it's not. We don't produce as many bottles as for the classic. It's less quantity.
Lovely. And I think we have Barry and Yvonne have a question. And I also believed whilst you answered, Tim's going to show some pictures of the vineyard that we think might be nice and relevant. So Barry, if you are, well, Barry and Yvonne, apologies. Not sure whether you've been unmuted. Ooh, Barry, are you there? I will ask on Barry's behalf. It was a question around the, you mentioned the frost in 1956. Have you had any frost problems in recent times, or do you have problems with heat? Sort of what weather issues do you now have?
It's true that sometimes we think that the weather is getting crazy the last decades, because we had hail in 2013. We had a frost in 2017. Yeah, frost in it was the 2nd of May. I think it was very late frost, so very it really damaged pretty much the production. So and at the moment it's the hailstorm season. So yesterday we had a light one. But until the harvest, we will be very under stress with the storm, because yes, you never know what's going to happen. And heat, yes, of course, the vines can suffer from heat. But thanks to our clay soils, we manage to keep the freshness in our soils. When they do suffer from heat, it's very very rare, because of the clay soil we have. We keep the freshness. We keep some water. Yeah. But we really worried about the forecast all the time.
And I understand you even had hail last night.
Yes, it was a little one, but you know, it can be, when it's harder, it's you can lose a lot. But it's for everybody's.
We have a very topical question from Philippa, and unfortunately, Philippa, we haven't been able to unmute you. But she wanted to know what effect the pandemic has had on the business and the winery.
First of all, we have to tell the members that we open all year long. So if some of them want to visit us, they're really welcome. and if they say they come from the wine society, it's even better. No, not kidding. I don't. I'm kidding, but we are open all the year, and during summer we open also on Saturday, and we have this is a tasting room, but we want to be able to welcome people and to make them taste all the range and to explain them. So we entered in the wine tourism also recently with a large offer with picnic, and with also some parties in the park on Thursday. So yes, we're very open. They can come and visit us. It will be our pleasure. And please, if you come to Bordeaux, come to Entre-Deux-Mers, because it's a very beautiful area, and you have to get lost in those little roads, and it will be a good experience for you. That's important.
Fantastic, thank you. And other than that, so far, harvest hasn't been too affected by the pandemic?
Pandemic? The harvest?
Le virus.
About coronavirus. So you'll be able to get, you'll be able to get harvest workers and things?
Yes, the sales were very affected. I mean, since the March 13, the sales really decreased a lot. We export 60% of the production, but we can see that all the countries we were exported were affected by the crisis. And both. I don't watch the sales any longer. I decided not to watch the numbers. I prefer, being focused on September. I hope.
Absolutely. Now we have a question from George Cox. My worry is that George may not be able to unmute himself, but George, hopefully.
No, I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
You are indeed.
Oh, great. Yes. I'd like to ask a question of Sylvie and Marie when they were talking about the freshness of the wine earlier. My question is two-pronged, really. Firstly, does the proportion of the blend of the three grape varieties change from year to year, or is it always the same? And secondly, do they prevent the malolactic fermentation to preserve freshness?
Yeah. The blend is not changing a lot, except on Sauvignon Gris. Sometimes it's 15%, sometimes it's a little bit less. Sauvignon Gris is very interesting because it adds a lot of structure to the wine, also on the mouth, but sometimes can be a little bit too heavy. So we really need to be careful with this variety. And then what was the question? I'm sorry.
The blend each year, is it the same?
So the blending is not really the same every year, but then afterwards there was another question. Sorry,
about malolactic.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we don't do malolactic fermentation. We stop after the alcoholic fermentation. We keep on the wine on lees, but at a cold temperature. So then the malolactic fermentation is not starting, and we don't want to have any malolactic fermentation. Otherwise, it would be too heavy and not without. We prefer keeping the freshness and the fruit. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's pretty much, unfortunately, all we have time for. We did have one question that we wanted to ask you as a team, though. What's next? What are your plans? Do you have any sort of experiments going on in the vineyard? Anything like that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I think we always have to experiment things. Today, the viticulture is really focused on protecting environment. So all the new investments are integrate yeah, sustainable philosophy. That's important because we have to invest in different machines, and so environment is also really on our mind about investment. We would like to experiment maybe new varieties in order to keep this balance that we want to reach. I don't know if you know, but we already planted varieties which are not allowed in Bordeaux. We planted the Syrah and Chardonnay in 2006. So we were the first to experiment new varieties, and I think yes, it's always a big challenge to be the first to experiment this kind of new varieties. So we want to keep on experimenting. Yes, this is part of the challenge, and also to run a sustainable viticulture. That's really important.
Thank you very much. Tim, I don't know whether you've got anything you'd like to add.
Well, I do actually. I've got a couple of anecdotes that I thought I would share with you before we finish. I got in touch with Sebastian Payne, who bought Bordeaux for the Wine Society for many years, and just because I wanted him to check whether he was in agreement that 1981 was the first vintage that we bought. And he obviously managed to unearth his tasting book from the early 80s. And he said to me that his first visit to Chile was on the 20th of April, 1983. And he said he wrote in his diary or in his tasting book, attractive wife who teaches maths in Bordeaux, 2 girls aged 7 and 5. And then he said that he managed to find his tasting booklet from the following year, and he talks about Sylvie and Marie's father, Francis, who was a teacher at in Bordeaux of viticulture and winemaking, and he was very impressed that back in 1984, Francis was interested in production in Australia. He clearly realized that things were happening in other parts of the world, and he wanted to know more about it. And according to Sebastian, Francis was a pioneer of good Sauvignon Blanc in Bordeaux, and that's why the Wine Society continues to buy Chile.
Thank you for that. Thank you for this longer partnership. We're very proud to work with you.
Thank you both very much for joining us, and thank you again to Tim Sykes as well for joining us this evening. I hope that you've all had a lovely night, members. I hope that you have a lovely glass to enjoy with your dinner as well. Absolutely. A lovely cheers and a great big thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Bye.
Cheers.
J'entends rien. Je passe des choses. J'entends rien, j'ai l'habitude. J'entends rien. Je comprends rien en fait.